In olden days, a glimpse of femur was only for morbid dreamers, but you're not alone. Bring anything bones. Two goofy gals with deathly interest go on a skeleton inquest in your headphones. Anything bones.
Hello and welcome to Anything Bones. I'm Sophie Schwartz.
And I'm Katelyn Hart. Hi, everyone.
This is the show where we talk about bones and bone-related topics. And this is our super special, super spooky Halloween episode.
We love Halloween, so it makes sense to do a kind of spooky Halloween episode for Anything Bones.
For our extra special Halloween episode, we had to have an extra special guest. So I present to you cat mom, rat mom, human wife, and Halloween enthusiast, Shelby Isham. Welcome.
Hi,
Thank you.
Shelby.
I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. Do you want to tell the listeners just a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, so all of what you said is true and correct. I really, really love Halloween. And usually I will have like at least 2 different costumes for the season, but typically like it's closer to like 5. I do lots of spooky performance related things. I really love horror movies. And I recently got a subscription to Shudder. Finally, I bit the bullet and I bought that. And it's been a worthwhile purchase. And it's relevant to what I'm going to talk about. So that's why I mention it. Not because I'm trying to like plug them or anything.
Yeah, sponsored by.
I wish. Shudder, get at us.
Yeah.
And for the listeners at home, the 3 of us all met in college, and we've all known each other for 8 years, 7-8 years at this point.
Yeah.
My first impression of Shelby was like a play festival in college that was all like student written work. And she played an evangelist preacher in zombie apocalypse times. I was so stricken by her performance. I knew, hey, had to be her friend.
My first impression of Sophie was she's got great eyeliner and I want to be her friend.
Aww. Enough with the gushy shit. Let's get to the bones. Okay, so I will go first because I have a question for you guys. Has this ever happened to you? You're walking around at night, you're doing your witchy business, you're hagging around, and you see a house that you would really like to rob. And you see the lights are out, so maybe everybody's asleep, but you're not sure. And how could you possibly know? You could look in the window, but why would you do that when you have Hand of Glory? Yes,
Ooh.
I am talking to you today about Hand of Glory. People might be familiar with this concept or this myth or legend because it's mentioned in a lot of fantasy stuff. It's mentioned in Harry Potter, there's video games, and there's a lot of literature about it. But was a real thing that people made. Shelby, you're nodding. Are you familiar with Hand of Glory?
Mm-hmm. Yes, I am.
So those uninitiated to Hand of Glory, it is a dried and pickled, usually the left hand of a criminal, usually a murderer, that's been hanged. And my sources say that the best way to get one is to just chop it right off the hanging person. You got to get it fresh.
Oh, do you mean like rather than waiting until they're buried and doing a grave robbery, just get them while they're still hanging?
Yeah, you got to get it while it's hot.
All that evil tissue gets deteriorated if you do it later.
Exactly. Precisely.
Also, can I add a fun fact? I don't know if it might already be in your notes, but do you know what another word for left is?
No, hit us.
Sinister.
Oh, I feel like I
That's
did know
good.
that.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that.
I don't have like a nice way to tie that, but you were talking about left hands and that's what came to mind for me.
Yeah, I think the etymology of left and sinister and bad and like this myth are all like tied together, I'm pretty sure.
Oh, yeah, because all left-handed people are bad.
Exactly. That's what people
Absolutely.
believed.
Really?
Demons
I was kidding.
No, in history, there's actually a lot of left-handed prejudice if you look into it. I
Jeez.
think it was a sign of being a witch at some point as well. But anyway, back to Hand of Glory. So it's a corpse hand that you've taken off a hanged criminal, usually a murderer, and you want it to be the hand that did the deed, if you can manage that. And usually it's combined with a candle that's made from like corpse fat from the same corpse, again, if you can manage it. But I think probably any corpse wax will do. And so you make a candle out of the corpse wax and you stick it in the hand of your corpse hand, your Hand of Glory. And then when lit, this candle will tell you if anyone's awake in the house, or it'll like stupefy people. It'll make them fall asleep or be unable to move while you do your dark mischiefs. And so like the Hand of Glory has been mentioned in folklore dating back to the 1600s. It's mentioned in different grimoires and different supernatural manuals, like the Petit Albert of 1722 and the Compendium Malacarum, which was a witch hunting manual, and that's from Italy in 1608. But
Oh, like the Malleus Maleficarum, like that one? Or is it the same thing with a different name?
Probably. You're a little more knowledgeable about this stuff than I am.
I'm not that much more knowledgeable. I just know lots of words.
You belong on this
Sounds like-
podcast.
Also, like going back to our conversation of words, so the term Hand of Glory may have been derived from Main de Glory, which some people think is a modification of mandrake, which is a herb that in legend is supposed to, incite madness, expel demons, and induce deep sleep. So makes a lot of sense.
I think the word in French for hand is main. They say it with a French accent, but I believe it's spelled M-A-I-N. Yeah.
Could you give us a pronunciation of Main de Glory?
La main de glory.
Fully
No, scratch that. Why did I bother taking French in high school?
Yeah, if you can't even give us a spooky pronunciation, what's it all for?
I thought that was pretty spooky. Please continue.
That sent shivers down my spine.
Thank God. Thank you, Shelby.
So y'all are you're fully sold on this hand, right?
Oh, yes.
So we want to know how to make one, right?
Absolutely, yes.
After you cut off this hand of a dead criminal, I've got a quote here from Sabine Baring Gould's Curious Myths of the Middle Ages. And this is how apparently we're going to make this hand. Wrap the hand in a piece of winding sheet, drawing it tight so as to squeeze out the little blood which may remain. Then place it in an earthenware vessel with saltpeter, salt, and long pepper, all carefully and thoroughly powdered. Let it remain a fortnight in this pickle till it is well dried, then expose it to the sun in the dog days till it is completely parched, or if the sun be not powerful enough, dry it in the oven with vervain and fern. Next, make a candle with the fat of a hung man, virgin wax, and Lapland sesame. So, pretty easy.
I just have to say the like cheat version of if you don't have sunlight, just put it in the oven is so like it's so funny to me.
I want to see this whole recipe written out like one of those mommy blogger recipes where it's like the whole like life story of the writer before you get to the recipe. Like, my great grandmother used to make hands of glory for us every Easter. That's what I would like to see.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that article would be titled like my grandma's favorite Christmas time hands of glory.
Exactly.
I did have a question come up, and I don't know if you're going to be able to answer this, Soph, but are hands of glory just something that witches make, or do you think that that's something that, kind of a day-to-day person who doesn't practice witchcraft would ever be interested in?
I think it can be made by witches, but I think it's mostly made by thieves. In all of my research, it seems like something that only like thieves use. But there's something that I'm going to talk about a little later where it could have been used in some folk magic for protecting the home. So it's possible that more people made them. It was a pretty well-known thing. That kind of leads me into the legends of this Hand of Glory, because I think it was less of people seeing them being used and more of the spreading of these legends, which all kind of have to do with someone rolling up to an inn and wanting to rob it, and then trying to rob it, and then being thwarted by a young servant girl.
Oddly specific.
Well, I came across this document that I think is a paper or a book. It's called The Hand of Glory and Other Legends About Human Hands. And it's written by D.L. Ashman of the University of Pittsburgh. And I kind of boiled down, a lot of the myths are very similar, so I kind of boiled it down to this one little legend that I'll tell you right now. And this is kind of the most famous one, the Inn of Spittle on Stainmore.
Spittle?
Yeah.
From your mouth?
Yeah. I was listening to an episode of the Dirt Pod where they talked a little bit about Hands of Glory. And on an episode after that, they said that someone wrote in and said that spittle could be a contraction of hospital, on Stainmore, which could have been like on the moor. So it's like a really fast way of saying like near the hospital, on the moor. Okay. I don't know. But
I like the idea of it being like an iconic spittoon, very much like the gum wall in Seattle, where all of the guests of this inn like have to like do like a commemorative spit into it if you visit there.
Yeah, before you go, make sure you leave a little in the spittoon. It's like our guest book.
Yeah, it's the world's first pool.
Caitlin.
Sorry.
Yum.
That's inaccurate.
Way to fact check yourself.
Yeah.
Okay, so the Spittle Inn on Stainmore, and in my notes I wrote, pretend it's something more spooky, like the Skull Inn on Bloodstainmore. So around 1797, there was a guy named George, and his family owned the Spittle Inn, and they had a servant girl, and they all lived there together. And one very dark and spooky, scary night, they had a very bad feeling deep in their bones. And suddenly, there was a rattle and a knock at the door. And George goes over, and it's this old woman, and she's soaked with rain, and she's shivering. And he's like, do you want to come in? And she's like, okay, yeah. Then he's like, do you want us to dry your cloak on the mantle? Do you want some food? Do you want a place to sleep? And she's like, no, I just want to sit by the fire, and I'm not going to take off my hood. Just go to bed, leave me be. I'll be gone in the morning before you even know it. And they're like, oh, okay, all right. And they're still getting a really bad feeling. And the servant girl kind of notices, and this so wouldn't be in like a legend today, but like notices that the old woman appears to be wearing pants underneath her dress, and this strikes her as very suspicious. You can't trust a woman who wears pants.
Put that on my t-shirt, please.
But not pants, because I won't be wearing them.
No. So then they're a little creeped out by this lady, but they decide everyone in the family is going to go to bed anyway. They all go to bed, except for, of course, the servant girl, who was most creeped out by the pants, probably, and decides that she's going to go spy on the old woman just to kind of see what's up. And so she is spying on the old woman, and she hears her muttering to herself, and she tries to get a little closer, and she hears that the old woman is muttering, "Let those who rest more deeply sleep. Let those awake their vigils keep. Hand of glory, shed thy light. Direct us to our spoil tonight. Flash thy blaze, O skeleton hand, and guide the feet of our trusty band." The servant girl's like, oh no. And she sees this old woman. First, old woman throws off her cloak. It's not an old woman.
It never is.
No, it's a thief. It was a man, and he was wearing pants. he's got this old grisly corpse hand, and there's a candle in the hand, and the candle is lit, and she's freaking out. And so she runs up to go wake up the family, but none of them can be roused. They're all dead asleep. And she's like, shit, 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 shit. And she runs back down the stairs, and she can hear the thieves in the house, and they're starting to do their business. They're getting all their valuables. And
Did I miss where you said that there's several thieves now?
there's several thieves now.
Where did they come from?
They came in the door. They came in the windows. They came down the chimney.
Wow. That's a lot of thieves.
It's so many thieves. It's way more thieves than you ever thought that there could be.
House is absolutely crawling with thieves.
It's filthy with thieves. And she runs back into the kitchen quick as she can, and she tries to blow out the hand of glory, but she can't. It's not going to go out. So she goes and she gets some water, and she throws it on the hand of glory, and that shit is still on fire. And so she's like looking around wildly, what can I use? What can I use? She sees a little pail of milk, and she's like, whatever, fuck it. And she throws it on the hand of glory, and the milk extinguishes it.
Huh.
And everyone that in the house like wakes back up, and they all run down, and the thieves are like, okay, you got us. Like, let us take our hand of glory and we won't hurt you. And they're like, hell no. And the dad like tries to shoot them. Then the thieves go running off, and this family retains this hand of glory for the next 16 years. That's kind of one of the most famous legends that all the other legends seem to be outspurts of.
I wonder why milk is what did it. Like, what about milk defeated the hand of glory?
I'm not sure. I've read that it's either milk or blood that you can use to extinguish it. Because sometimes it's like one candle in the palm. Sometimes it's all the fingers are lit, like the hand and the candle are one and the same.
Do you think it depends on whether the hanged man from whom the hand was cut was lactose intolerant?
I think that's probably got to be part of it. If your hand of glory doesn't work, then it meant your thief could drink milk. But so I was looking at instances where people may have used this hand of glory, because I was looking for some sort of record of it. In that same paper on hands and other hand legends, there's a quote from a book called A Provincial Glossary with Collections of Local Proverbs and Popular Superstitions from 1887, written by Francis Gross. But I just like this quote that says, I acknowledge I never tried the secret of the hand of glory, but I have thrice assisted at the definitive judgment of certain criminals who, under torture, confessed to having used one.
Oh, well, if they said it because they were tortured, then it must be true.
Yeah, definitely credible.
Super credible.
Without a doubt.
Totally used a hand of glory, absolutely. And there's a very iconic true crime case about a mysterious murder during World War II that's known as Who Put Bella in the Wych Elm. And there's some reference to hand of glory in there, but I'm not quite sure how it works in. But the Wikipedia article did say that it possibly had something to do with it. But there is a hand of glory in a museum.
Which museum?
So this is from an article titled Mummified Hand from Yorkshire May Be Last Hand of Glory Still in Existence. This is from ancientorigins.net. This hand of glory was first uncovered in 1935 inside the wall of a thatched cottage in Castleton by a stonemason named Joseph Ford. Joseph Ford was like, I know exactly what this is, and donated it to the Whitby Museum. The museum kind of cites that it could either have been placed in there as a protection against evil spirits, or possibly by a thief who intended to rob the place, and it was placed in there either before or after he did his dark deeds.
I wish that my one job was to tear out the walls of houses and find weird shit in there. I think that would be the best kind of treasure hunt that I could ever go on.
Yeah.
Until you find like, an eyeless baby doll or something.
Yeah. I think it would be rather alarming to find a like severed hand inside of a wall. I think I might change jobs after that.
A severed
But if
foot
you were
would be fine though.
Oh, yeah. Feet are much less creepy.
a foot of glory probably doesn't do anything though, you know? Some people tried it and it just really didn't work as well as the hand of glory. So they're like, all right.
A 1 mile radius.
Yeah, it actually, instead of putting to sleep, it woke people up.
From the smell.
It's the opposite of what you want. But yeah, so that's Hands of Glory. I thought it would be fun for Halloween because it's kind of witchy. It's kind of silly, but it's interesting that there is one in a museum. You can go and see one of these disgusting preserved hands.
That's amazing. I'm really, really fascinated. I like the idea of how you were talking about how like it could be like the hand holding a candle, or like the whole hand could be candled.
And there were a bunch of different, all of the recipes are kind of the same, but like construction is a little different. Some sources say that like the candle has to, like the wick has to be of the hair of the guy. So you have to steal this whole guy because you're going to need his hand. You're going to need his fat. You're going to need his hair. That's a lot.
And every family has their own twist on the recipe.
It's true. My grandma puts extra cinnamon in her Hands of Glory.
To cover up the smell. Anyway.
Yeah, when that thing burns, it's gotta be gnarly.
Ugh.
My sources were from occultworld.com, Atlas Obscura, ancientorigins.net, Wikipedia, thelineup.com, and of course, The Hand of Glory and Other Legends About Human Hands by D.L. Ashyman or Ashman. Well, that's my hands. I'll hand it off to you, Shelby. What do you want to talk about?
Oh man. So I obviously have been watching a lot of horror movies, and I was thinking about Poltergeist, which is not actually a movie that I particularly enjoy, but it's definitely iconic. One of the reasons I think it's so iconic is that it has a curse associated with it. And the Poltergeist curse is rumored to be a thing because real bones were used during filming of the first and subsequent Poltergeist films. And I will be speaking to the veracity of that in a little bit. Well, I guess I should start by saying that I got a lot of this information from the Shudder docu-series Cursed Films. So I watched the episode on the Poltergeist curse. I also got a lot of information from Snopes, IMDb, and our good friend Wikipedia. So this is where I'm going to be pulling all my information from. And I'm not going to worry too much about giving you guys spoilers because this film came out in 1982. So
Yeah.
if you haven't seen it by now,
You're never going to.
basically, yes.
I have seen it.
What are your thoughts on it?
My thoughts on it, I like it. I like that it's so campy because, like you said, it was made in the 80s. So it's like that kind of scary where you're like, yeah, this is creepy, but I'm not actually scared at all.
Definitely. Well, and it's interesting because like I really love horror like from like the 70s, and there are some really, really scary movies from the 70s. So I don't think that it's necessarily just the fact that it's from a time when maybe special effects were not as realistic as they can be now. But I do think something about that film is super, super, super campy.
Definitely.
And I don't find it particularly scary, but it's definitely like entertaining in its own right. Anyways, the whole idea of the film is that this family is experiencing these disturbances in their house. They're coming to the TV. They're talking to the family's 5-year-old daughter, Carol Ann, and Carol Ann gets sucked into the netherworld. And so the family has to fight these evil spirits to get her back into the land of the living. Throughout the course of the film, the father, who's like a realtor and he's like selling all of these homes in this development that he lives in, finds out that the whole development used to be a cemetery. And he finds out that they moved the cemetery, but they didn't move the bodies. And so there's this really iconic scene where his wife ends up they're building a pool, and she ends up inside the mud pit of the pool, and it's raining really hard, and all of these bodies start rising out of the mud. And so she's just in this pit of mud and bones, splashing around and screaming. And that is where people say that they used real bones, and thus had a curse on the entire franchise. And somebody in the Shudder episode called it a meta curse, because really, if you think about it, the whole problem of the film is that these bodies really weren't being respected, because they had a bunch of houses built all over them. And at the same time, in our world, the bodies weren't being respected as the films were being made by being used in this way. So that's where people think the curse comes from. Now, what is the curse? Why do we think that there's a curse? Because there were several deaths of people who were associated with the franchise, and there are two mainly tragic ones, and then there are two other deaths that are also tragic, but maybe not as traumatizing, I guess, as the other two. So I'll start with the other two first, and they are associated with Poltergeist 2, which I haven't seen. I haven't seen any of the other ones aside from the first one. So in Poltergeist 2, Will Sampson, who is a famous Native American actor, he died after filming Poltergeist 2 of kidney failure after surgery. And I think that he already had several health issues. He was also, according to several sources, but I couldn't find any that I thought were super credible, but he was also apparently a shaman, and he performed a real life exorcism on the set of Poltergeist 2. And I'll read this piece of trivia from IMDb. In one scene, when real cadavers were used in place of props, an entire day's worth of film stock mysteriously came out completely black. Thus, a whole day of filming that cost $50,000 to $100,000 had to be reshot. The night before the reshoots, Will Sampson performed an exorcism at 4 a.m. in order to rid the set of evil spirits and ease the tension of the frightened cast and crew, who had actually started to believe the franchise was cursed. That's kind of a fun fact, but he did die after that film. And then the actor Julian Beck, who played this scary cult leader in Poltergeist 2, died of stomach cancer. He was older, so again, it doesn't seem super out of place, but he did pass away after Poltergeist 2. And they actually made a death mask of him for Poltergeist 3, which they wanted him involved in. It's a prosthetic for the actor that went on to play his character, which is just a creepy piece of trivia.
They made a death mask, like a cast of his face, and then they used that to create prosthetics.
Yes.
To put on another person?
Yes. Now, it's unclear as to whether he was actually dead when they made this cast of his face, or if he was still alive, but they call it a death mask, which is just lovely.
Oh, I mean, but that's like its own thing. People making casts of the dead. How important was it to make this movie?
I don't really understand why they needed this character to look exactly like this deceased actor. You would think creepy old guy looks like creepy old guy, right? I think everyone would have forgiven them, but who knows? So I'm going to move on to the more tragic deaths associated with the Poltergeist franchise. So first I'm going to talk about Dominique Dunne, and she is the actor who played Dana, the older teenage daughter of the Freeling family in the first Poltergeist. Shortly after Poltergeist was released, Dominique Dunne was strangled by an ex-boyfriend, who I'm not even going to name because that piece of shit doesn't deserve any more recognition than he already has for that. He strangled her and put her in a coma, and she later passed away. So she did not return, obviously, for Poltergeist 2 or any of the other ones. She was supposed to be away at college in those films, and they were supposed to shoot a scene of her being at college, and they ended up just having to cut it completely because she is no longer with us. And then The death that really rocked the whole franchise, I would say, was the death of Heather O'Rourke, who played Carol Ann. And Carol Ann is, like I said, she was the 5-year-old youngest daughter in the first Poltergeist. And she's really the catalyst for the conflict in these films. She performed in Poltergeist and Poltergeist 2. Heather O'Rourke was diagnosed with Crohn's disease, but it turns out that wasn't actually the proper diagnosis. So she didn't actually have Crohn's disease. What she had was a congenital bowel obstruction that nobody knew about. And so when she was, I want to say 12 years old, it became, inflamed, or it exploded, and she went into toxic shock and she passed away when she was about 12 years old. And this was during the filming for Poltergeist 3. The director, Gary Sherman, said that after she passed away, the team decided that they just didn't even want to finish the movie. They were so heartbroken and they just didn't even know what to do. But the studio said, like, no, you need to finish it. We've put too much money into this. You just got to finish it, like, figure it out. And so they came up with what he called a stupid ending that actually ended up being how the film ended. They used a body double for Carol Ann, and they just like dressed her up as Heather and made sure to keep her face away from the camera. So that's 4 deaths associated with this franchise. I am inclined to think that, although it's a sad coincidence that these people were all associated with the Poltergeist franchise, I don't think that it's, you would think that if it was a curse, they would all have died in like freak accidents or like in some sort of like similar way. I don't know. That's just me, I guess. But the actress Zelda Rubinstein, who played Tangina Burrows, she's the main like sidekick in the films. She called it a load of crap. Gary Sherman also called it a load of crap and said that, you know, it was borderline insulting to the people who we lost to say that it was because of a curse. And I'm going to talk about the veracity of the claims that real bones were used. And so I'm going to move on to good old Snopes and say that the claim that real skeletons were used for a sequence in the horror movie Poltergeist is true. That being said, it was actually cheaper throughout most of film history to use real bones. It was more expensive to make plastic and rubber skeletons, so plenty of movies have used real bones. And what they did with the corpses in Poltergeist was they got these real bones from like a research lab, and then they like dressed them up to make them look like decayed corpses instead of like cleaned, bleached bones. But it is true. That being said, again, I think that if just using real bones on a set were enough to cause a curse, then a lot more films would be cursed. So that's a Poltergeist curse, or maybe lack thereof. I highly recommend, if you have Shudder, checking out the docuseries about cursed films. It's really interesting. And check out Poltergeist.
Yeah, after this, Sophie, are you more or less likely to watch Poltergeist?
More, because now I'm going to be watching for those bones. I think your point is very valid that there's been a lot of real people parts used in many different films. But it could be that those bones were particularly strong.
I mean, maybe. I don't know. I think that if my bones had the opportunity to be a part of movie magic, I would prefer that as a way to go, you know.
Cool, we'll keep that in mind.
Please do.
I would be down for my bones to be used in a movie.
I also really, really wish that my skin could be turned into leather goods to hand down to my grandchildren, but my husband informs me that that is illegal.
Of course you guys talk about that.
I mean, check different state laws. Yeah.
You might have to move.
Yeah. Well, every state has kind of like abusive corpse laws are really vague purposefully. So like, depending on what state you're in, the laws are different. Like, I know that there are people who have gotten, amputated limbs back and like gotten them skeletonized. But this is a whole different thing.
All right. Well, I guess it's my turn.
Yeah.
And I want to preface this, Shelby and listeners, by telling you that Sophie and I did not know what each other's topics were going to be until 5 minutes before this call started. I'm going to be doing Who Put Bella in the Wych Elm? So, I'm glad you went first, though, because there is a little bit about a Hand of Glory in there, but that's not for a little bit. So this is a story that has been covered many times in many podcasts and movies and books and everything, but it's Halloween, and I thought this might be the kind of story where people will have heard of it before and maybe know some details, but then they won't remember all of these details that I'm about to tell you. All right, so I'll start by saying my sources were the glorious Wikipedia, Atlas Obscura, an article from Birmingham Live, a podcast episode from the Dark Histories podcast. It's season 1, episode 8. It's called Who Put Bella in the Wych Elm. And then I also watched a BuzzFeed Unsolved. I don't know if you've ever, they make videos on YouTube. It's these two guys that are really funny that cover a lot of unsolved mysteries and true crime stuff. I'll put links to all this in our show notes. So our story begins on April 18th, 1943, and 4 boys in England are out in Hagley Wood. They are looking for birds because they want to get their eggs. It's World War II, food is scarce, so they probably were very hungry and were trying to find food, but they weren't supposed to be on this land. It was private property. The 4 boys were named Robert Hart. Hey, that's my last name. I hope my relative found Bella in the Wych Elm. Robert Hart, Thomas Willets, Bob Farmer, and Fred Payne. So they were in the Hagley Woods on Hagley Estate, which belonged to someone named Lord Cobham, who doesn't really come into play in this story. Bob Farmer was climbing a tree, and he found what he thought was an animal skull, and he pulled it from inside of the tree, and oopsie, turns out it's a human skull.
Ooh.
And yeah, the skull had a small piece of skin and brown hair still attached, but other than that, it was fully skeletonized. Because the boys weren't supposed to be on the property, and probably it wasn't a good idea to be poaching either, that was probably an offense, the boys decide, let's put this back and never talk about it again. The youngest boy, Thomas Willets, cracks first and tells his dad what happened. And the next morning, Dad calls the police, and I think Thomas Willets actually took the police to where he found where the skull was found in the Wych Elm. Did I say that it was a Wych Elm that they were looking in? Because it was.
Difference between a Wych Elm and a regular elm.
So I looked up some pictures of it. These are those trees. They can have super thick trunks. This one was about 5 to 6 feet tall, and it tapered down to a point of about 17 inches in diameter, according to the BuzzFeed video. It's one of those trees that has kind of winding branches where you can sometimes see into the branches. I think it's kind of unclear if this was a full tree or just a tree trunk. My guess is it was just a tree trunk because obviously she had to get in there somehow. It's just kind of a weird looking tree that you can kind of peek through and see it. The Dark Histories podcast said that the skeleton was wedged so tightly in the tree that they had to cut down a lot of it to actually get the skeleton out of there. So they found, along with the skull that the boys had taken out of the trunk and then put back in the trunk, they found her skeleton, a shoe, a gold wedding ring, and some fragments of clothing. And of course, a little further away, they found her other shoe, like the matching set, and her hand. The forensic examination is done by a man named Professor James Webster, and he determines that everything in the trunk belonged to a petite woman. She was about 5 feet tall, and she was probably around 35 years old. They think that she had given birth at least once because of the shape of her pelvis. She had dark hair, distinctly irregular teeth. That's from Wikipedia. And I will send you a picture of, well, I'm burying the lead. Hold on. I'll show you what her teeth might have looked like later. So she had crazy teeth, and there was a wad of taffeta stuffed in her throat. The professor also established that she had been dead for probably 18 months at the time of her discovery. So she was discovered in April 1943, so they think she died sometime in 1941. Because of the taffeta in her mouth, the professor thought that she had died from suffocation. But the Dark Histories podcast that I listened to, the host claims that the boys took the skull out of the trunk, and then when they decided to put it back, they wrapped a piece of taffeta that they found at the crime scene on a stick, put that in the skull's mouth, and then used that stick to lower the skull back to its spot. So kind of unclear whether the taffeta was there just because it was there, or that is what was used to kill her, or if it was in her mouth because the boys because they were trying to cover it up. They might have put it in there. Not because they killed her. The boys definitely did not kill this person, but they 100% messed with the evidence, so we don't quite know. The other thing that was important from Professor Webster's examination is that she couldn't have fit in the tree trunk once rigor mortis set in, so she had to have been freshly dead or still alive when she went into the tree.
Damn.
Oh.
Yeah. He also determined that she went into the tree feet first. So the police actually do seem to do a pretty good job with this investigation. You know, it was a hard time. It was World War II. There were a lot of people that were missing, so everybody was at their full capacity with that. They decided that she was probably foreign, maybe German or Dutch, based on what was found with her, like the scraps of her clothing, and the fact that nobody from the area matching her description had been reported missing. She had a wedding ring, and she most likely had at least one child. So you have to imagine that if she was local, somebody would have noticed that she was missing. They also put out ads and really tried to get dentists to help them with solve this case, because she had these really irregular teeth. She had a missing tooth. I think it was the BuzzFeed video that said they thought that one of her teeth had been pulled within a year of her death. So they were like, a dentist has to be able to solve this. So I think they even published kind of a sketch of her teeth in the paper. They got kind of desperate, so they were trying to figure out how to identify this woman, and that didn't work. So the case goes cold. A few years go by, and then the best part of the story happens. In 1944, we get some graffiti on an empty building that says, "Who put Bella in the Wych Elm Hagley Wood?" And that graffiti, iterations of that, keep showing up all around the city. And it's always in block letters, white chalk, and sometimes she's referred to as Bella, sometimes she's Lou Bella, but it's always having to do with the Wych Elm and Hagley Wood, and they always spell witch, W-Y-C-H, which is the correct way to spell the name of this tree. The police are baffled by this because nobody ever takes credit for it. They're still not able to determine who she is, even though they might have her name, which is Bella or Lou Bella or something like that. But this is from Wikipedia. Since at least the 70s, the graffiti has and obviously before, because this started in the 40s, the graffiti has sporadically appeared on the Hagley obelisk, which is near where the body was discovered. And it's always kind of some iteration of who put Bella in the Wych Elm. And I couldn't confirm this, but I'm guessing that this kind of thing still is happening just because that's so creepy and like somebody trying to cause some mischief or, you know, whatever, stir shit up is probably always like, you know what would be fun? A fun Halloween trick is to go right on my obelisk over here.
Yeah, you have to imagine all of the neighborhood kids. It's like some sort of rite of passage or something.
Everybody has to write this on the obelisk at some point. Like I said, and like probably everybody here and everyone listening at home knows, this is still an unsolved case. What are the theories about who this woman could have been? One of the theories is that she was a sex worker. In 1944, another sex worker reported to police that a sex worker named Bella, who worked on Hagley Road, had disappeared about 3 years ago. So she reported this in 1944. We think that the skeleton Bella probably died in about 1941. So that could have been a possibility. It never really panned out. Another theory is, of course, witchcraft. Thank you, Sophie, for setting this up for me. So, like I said very briefly, one of her hands, I don't know which one, was found outside of the tree on the ground. Like, I don't know if it's kind of unclear. Some reports say it was buried. Some reports say it was just there. Obviously, it was just a skeleton at that point. So some people thought that it was a hand of glory and that maybe Bella had been killed in some kind of satanic ritual, human sacrifice. Maybe she was a witch. There's a theory that you can trap the soul of a witch inside a tree if she's causing too much trouble, like you can trap her in a tree and she won't do any harm anymore.
If she's wearing pants.
Yeah, she's wearing pants in the tree. She's toast.
I saw her wearing pants. Put that bitch in a tree.
And then this theory of witchcraft was further intensified because a man named Charles Walton was murdered in 1945 near where Bella was found, and he was found skewered to the ground by a pitchfork.
Skewered to the ground?
Yeah, that's from Birmingham Live. It's a direct quote. Skewered to the ground by a pitchfork.
Oh, that's grisly.
Fun.
Yeah. So they talked about this a little bit in the BuzzFeed video that I watched and in the podcast, the Dark Histories podcast. I don't know if I buy this hand of glory theory, because as you said, Soph, the hand is very useful after you've made it. So why would they leave it behind? You know, the whole point of making a hand of glory is that you have it and it only works for you, right?
Yeah, that's another part of the legend, is that some legends say it only gives light to the holder, the maker.
Right. So if the whole point of killing this person was to get a hand of glory, why would they just leave it behind? That doesn't make any sense.
Maybe they realized that she was the wrong kind of person. They're like, oh shit, this hand's not gonna work. Like she didn't
do anything wrong. Damn it.
She's not lactose intolerant. She's not a criminal. She's not been hanged. We've gone about this very poorly.
Damn it. So another, kind of more likely scenario, in my opinion, is that the hand was carried off and moved by animals, by scavengers. The Dark Histories podcast host did mention, though, that also is kind of weird, because why would an animal go up into this tree trunk, only grab a hand, and then like somehow detach it and then get it back up the tree and then far away? Like, it seems like, I'm maybe not explaining this right, but that seems like a very specific set of scenarios where that would work. So either it was a very strong scavenger, or who knows?
A super squirrel.
A super squirrel. You know those British squirrels, they can do anything.
They have a stiff upper lip.
That's right.
Helps them remove hands really easily.
Mm-hmm.
So that is a really good theory, but of course the police deny that Satanism or witchcraft is involved. They really don't pay much attention to this theory. Another favorite theory, and this one is the kind of the weirdest one, I think. It was either the police or like a newspaper several years later got a letter from somebody who said their name was Anna. And I'm going to read you this letter. Quote, You will never solve the mystery. The one person who could give the answer is now beyond the jurisdiction of earthly courts. The affair is closed and involves no witches, black magic, or moonlight rites. The person responsible died insane in 1942, and the victim was Dutch and arrived illegally in England about 1941. And now that I read that letter, I'm remembering a local paper or some paper was publishing articles about this skeleton in the Wych Elm, and this letter from Anna, quote unquote, was sent in to the newspaper to say, like, yeah, keep doing your stories, but you're never going to figure it out because the person who did it is already dead. Police follow up with this letter, obviously, because it's a very good clue, and they find out in 1953 that the letter was written by someone named Una Mossop, and she thinks that her ex-husband, Jack Mossop, might have done it or been involved. She claims that he confessed that he and a Dutchman named Van Ralt had put the woman in a tree. And I don't know about this one. Apparently, Mossop and Van Ralt got a drink at a pub in Hagley with this woman, and then the woman became drunk and passed out, and they put her in the tree as a prank so that, like, she would never drink again or something. Like, she'd wake up in this tree and be like, oh shit, I'm never gonna drink again. They also could have been in some kind of spy ring together. Not quite sure. So Jack Mossop was in a mental hospital, and he said that he had recurring dreams of a woman staring at him out of a tree. He died in the hospital way before the body was even found, like maybe not way before, but at some point before. And it seems like a little bit far-fetched because all of this came out in 1953, so 10 years after she had been found, and also years after Jack Mossop was dead. So it seems like a little far-fetched because, you know, why didn't she come forward right after he died? It's a little murky.
Well, and the other thing that's weird to me is that, like, why would she write this letter being like, you'll never figure it out? And then they track her down. She's like, oh yeah, so here's a story. Yeah. Like,
I think maybe we're talking about kind of a true crime aficionado who maybe wanted to insert herself in the investigation somehow.
Marino.
Yeah, very possible. And I kind of said this in my explanation about this letter from Una Mossop, but another main theory is that Bella in the Wych Elm was a spy. She might have been a Nazi spy. She also may have been connected to Joseph Jacobs, who was the last man put to death in the Tower of London in 1941. He had a picture of somebody with him, and her name was Clara. So people thought maybe Clara was Bella, and they were both spies. Joseph, like I said, was executed at the Tower of London, so nobody really knows. It is such a mystery. There's just so many theories, and all of them kind of make sense. And then there's usually one or two things where you're like, no, that doesn't make any sense.
Isn't there a theory that she was a spy and that she was parachuting into England and like landed in the tree or something, like, and was unable to like free herself from the tree and she died of starvation in the tree?
I've heard that before, but where's the parachute?
Yeah, that's,
you know,
yeah.
And I don't think I didn't say this. Professor Webster, when he did her autopsy, noted that there was no illness, there was no signs of violence. So the best guess that he could make was that she suffocated because of that taffeta in her mouth. But there was no other obvious signs of violence and no signs of illness. So if she had died in a parachuting accident, A, where's the parachute? And B, she would have signs of trauma on her body.
Yeah, and who lands smack into it, like into a tree? Like she had to land in the tree.
And then somebody who didn't know that this was happening, though, was walking by and was like, I better put this parachute in the garbage or something.
Oh, sick, a parachute. Thanks.
I needed that. This emptied out parachute. Thank you, God.
I mean, hey, it's World War II. Maybe they did need it. They were like, sick, a free parachute.
Well, another thing that I couldn't find any research on, but I had a question about, the land was owned by somebody named Lord Cobham. How does the family the Cobham family play into all of this? Because isn't this their land? I'm surprised there's not more information about the investigation into them, because you would think that if you had this huge estate and you murdered somebody and you hid the body on your own estate, that would make sense to me if I was a murderer.
Too rich, can't investigate.
Yes, could be.
just-
Totally could be.
I feel like there had to have been some sort of collective community effort to conceal what happened to this person. I think the idea that she was a sex worker or some sort of witchcraft idea, both of those to me would make sense as like either they didn't care enough about this woman to figure out who she was, or they, you know, were trying to rid the community of some sort of evil. And so I don't know, this is like a half-baked, all of these thoughts are really half-baked, but I feel like there have to be plenty more people who know things that are refusing to say things.
And now they're probably dead, honestly.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, at the time, I mean, I'm with you. I think the most likely scenario is that exactly what you said. She was a sex worker, and police honestly continue to devalue the lives of sex workers, and they are targeted by serial killers, murderers. We know this because they're a vulnerable population, and historically, police don't care about their murders as much. I'm not saying that's how I feel or how the podcast feels, but that's just the reality, unfortunately. So I think that's a very likely scenario, is that this was just somebody that was on the outskirts of society. And
especially given that there's actually a reported disappearance.
The only thing with that is that she also had a baby and had a wedding ring. So I don't know. I don't know how that plays in, but you know.
I mean, her husband might not have noticed that she was gone because he was at war. And
yeah. And a lot of people were going missing. There were air raids. So, you know, if somebody went missing on the night of an air raid, they would just assume that that's what happened to them and maybe have never known that their loved one was actually murdered rather than just being killed in an air raid. Both are bad scenarios, but you know what I mean? I sent you both a picture just to wrap up. So let me know when you see it.
Oh, wow.
So this is an artist's reconstruction of what she might have looked like. This was done by Carolyn Wilkinson, and I got this picture and all the information about this from the Birmingham Live article that was published in February 2018. Carolyn Wilkinson also did a reconstruction of Richard III's face after his remains were found in the parking garage. So she recreated this picture from photographs of the skeleton. And the reason she had to use photographs is because the whole skull skeleton, all the evidence is fucking missing.
What?
Yeah. They have no idea what happened to Bella's remains. They were with the police. They were supposed to be one place. They were maybe moved, and literally nobody can find anything. So she can't be helped by modern technology because she's missing. Her skeleton is completely gone.
Wow.
Okay, that's everything. I was a little nervous to do such an iconic story. I hope it made sense. Thanks for bearing with me on that, because that case has no ending.
Yeah.
It's just a bunch of theories. Like, there's some information from the 40s, and then there's this crazy graffiti, and she's just gone. So there's nothing we can do to identify her or help her at this point. And it'll probably be unsolved forever, honestly. Prove me wrong, science.
Yeah, I was going to say, unless someone knows where those remains are, get those, because you could do some modern DNA testing.
If you know where the remains are, message Sophie or Katelyn and tell them.
DM us, where are Bella's remains? We got to get those bones. I want a conclusion to this mystery for Halloween.
That can be our Halloween present.
What's your Halloween wish?
Good question. My wish is that everybody has a reality check with themselves and doesn't go to bars or restaurants or parties this Halloween because the pandemic is getting worse. So I don't want to end the episode on that note, but I'm just going to throw it out there.
My Halloween wish is that we have many more Halloweens to come that are safe and healthy and just as magical as this one should have been.
It's on a Saturday. What the fuck?
Yeah, full moon too.
Whoa. What's your Halloween wish, Soph?
My Halloween wish is for the Bella who in the Wych Elm to be solved. That was my Halloween wish. But if I had to make a second Halloween wish,
yes,
it would be that everyone vote.
Yes, perfect way to end this.
Well,
thank you so much, Shelby, for coming on.
Have a safe and happy Halloween. We love you.
Bon voyage. Thanks for listening to Anything Bones. Follow us on Instagram or Facebook at Anything Bones Podcast, or email us at anythingbonespodcast@gmail.com.
Thank you to Nick Kruger for our spooky music and Stephen Vetteroff
at Chubby Scrubby on Twitter
for our jazzy vocals, and thank you to Camilla Franklin
at Camilla Strader on Instagram
for our beautiful bony artwork. Please rate, review, and subscribe.
Bones!